to VPG's Virtual Water Cooler Chat podcast, a platform that celebrates the rich tapestry of professional diversity, with a particular emphasis on empowering women. We aim to foster diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, DEIA, for all, while recognizing and championing the achievements of everyone as a central pillar of our journey. In our conversations, we explore a wide spectrum of backgrounds, experiences, and perspectives, creating a vibrant mosaic that enriches our collective understanding and strengthens our commitment to diversity and empowerment. Irene Liu is the founder of Hypergrowth GC and an executive in residence at UC Berkeley School of Law. After building and scaling international multi-billion-dollar technology companies, she now helps spur growth at other companies as an advisor, thought leader, and executive coach. She is a frequent writer and contributor to the Thomson Reuters Institute and hosts the Hypergrowth GC video series on Luminate Plus and Coffee Break with Irene on Berkeley Boost. Irene brings invaluable expertise on AI as an advisor for Berkeley Law's AI Institute and Women Defining AI. She further contributes crucial insights on AI to the California government on AI-related matters and has previously spoken at an FTC public hearing on AI. Before going in-house, Irene worked at the U.S. Department of Justice, Antitrust Division, and the Federal Trade Commission in the Bureau of Consumer Protection. Irene was the Chief Financial and Legal Officer at Hopin, a leading community engagement platform where she managed legal, finance, policy, and trust and safety teams. She was also the General Counsel of Checkr, a provider of modern background checks, where she managed legal, compliance, policy, finance, and customer education teams.
Irene, so lovely to have you. Thank you for accepting my invite to chat on this virtual water cooler chat. How are you today?
Thank you so much for inviting me, Ashley. I'm so excited to join your virtual water cooler. That's where all the best conversations happen.
Oh, so Irene, tell us a little bit about yourself. And I actually listened to Richard Shu's Shu and Tai. I like to do my homework before I chat with someone.
Thank you.
And it was such an amazing story. And one thing that I did not realize, are you Korean?
Yeah, I am.
Okay, because I think your last name
confuses everyone.
Confused me.
You're not the only.
So I did my homework. Can you tell me a little bit about how it was when you first come to the States and the story that actually made you who you are today?
Yeah, so you're right. Many people get me confused and think I'm Chinese or Taiwanese because of my last name, Liu. My husband is Taiwanese. My maiden name is Lee. I'm Korean. And I was born in Korea, in Seoul, and then I immigrated when I was 8 to Chicago. And so when I immigrated, I had to learn English. I'm a product of the Chicago public school system, and I have a lot of stories growing up, not speaking English, but at the same time, I think it's made me stronger as an individual and really empathize the stories of immigrants and minorities and our American dream.
So it started in Chicago. Were your parents college educated? How was that like coming in? I know about the struggle of learning English. And when I first came to the States, I was in Virginia. So definitely in the East Coast. And at some point, my parents met up with some friends and they were like, you don't want to raise your kids in the big city because they might join the gangs. I don't know. So they moved us to Kansas.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So we went to the Midwest, Lawrence, Kansas, where my parents opened a Chinese restaurant. And we were there for about 10 plus years. I mean, I started in junior high, but when I finally graduated, I was rock, chalk, J-hop all the way. And in my spare time, have to have help at the restaurant. And so actually got to know a lot of scholars because that's where they go to have food.
That is so fascinating because you were near university.
Yeah, I was at the University of Kansas. It's actually in Lawrence, Kansas. So that was really how it gets started. I did not take the STEM route, but you did. You did finance, investment banking, and then turned tech and went to DOJ. You have a fascinating background. I think the word that you use is you like to sprint. So can you talk about your sprinting career?
Yeah, I mean, I think just going back on the Chicago question, you were saying was my immigrant story. I mean, my parents were college educated. They came to America seeking better economic and education opportunities for us, like many. While they were college educated, like many Korean immigrants, they also started a store. So they had a very small beauty supply store that was in the city of Chicago. And they basically raised my sister and I off of that store. I mean, they worked there every single day and worked really hard. And like you, I often had to spend many of my weekends and summer vacations helping them in the store. And, you know, it really allowed me to see and sense what their dreams are. You know, obviously they didn't want that kind of future for us. And so it's something that teaches you grit and you want to do better for them because they work so hard. And so I think part of my sprinting and my journey is also to make them proud and make and create economic opportunities for myself and for my family as well.
Do you think that, so my parents were not college educated, so I had a different type of struggle. I was the first college educated in the both maternal and paternal family. So there were a lot of things that, thank God I was in the university town.
Yeah.
And thank God they opened a Chinese restaurant. At some point, I remember that, like, I don't know that I can really put on my resume that I'm just like waitressing and helping out at the family. So I don't know exactly what I'm going to do. And then one day I started talking to one of my professors, and he was like, well, you should go and do something at the Center for East Asian Studies. And I actually had a Chinese professor that was like, you know, you should go into like the State Department route. So he nominated me for some like Chinese language award. So I got it. So I was totally going that route. You know, I was poli-sci major.
Yeah.
And East Asian language and culture. It was easy for me to get like bump up my GPA because I already read.
Yeah.
And I just didn't speak it so well, but I learned Mandarin in college. So I had a lot of different guidance, and at some point, you and I have a lot of similarities. We just keep stacking it up, stacking on. And so I think a lot of it is like the training that we have.
Yeah.
They always said that, you know, it's not productive to be multitasking because you're not really focusing on anything. Well, I didn't know the difference because if you only have 24 hours a day, you got to help your parents.
Yeah.
You got to do well in school. And at some point, you hope to exit the restaurant business. So how do you actually ramp up your resume? So a couple of my professors was like, you should go be an assistant at the Center for East Asian Studies. So I did. And we used to have like it's called Lippincott Hall at KU. And they had like Russian studies and international study, East Asian study, Latin American studies. And I am surrounded by all the professors.
Yeah.
And they come to the restaurant again. But like most of the time, so I was helping them with doing like the Title IV research grant for the Department of Education. And so I was exposed to a lot of grant writing.
Fascinating.
Yeah, so that part I never really talk about it. And the topic that we have today is like growth. And you have a company called Hypergrowth GC, which we will get to that. But I think part of it is sometimes things happen when you don't know exactly how they happen and why it happened. So I think it's going to be a very interesting episode, like when we are connecting the dots. It's not until I started doing the virtual water cooler chat that I'm remembering some of these things that happened, because I've never talked about the research grant part. And at one point, I remember that one of my international business law professor, he's a Chinese scholar, speaks fluent Chinese, and he told me, hey, we have an extra grant and we could probably bring like a scholar here to get on a panel. And I was like, okay, well, who should we get? So at the time, I was a poli-sci major, so I thought that maybe we would just look at some of the Chinese scholars. And one of the person is Dean Harry Harding from the Ellis School of International Affairs. So I was like, maybe we could get Dean Harding here. And then he was like, I don't know, Dean Harding is like pretty up there. I don't know that we can get him here. So I wrote him.
Oh, that's
like
fun.
when I did my thesis, I was like, oh, because his wife is also Chinese from Hong Kong. So we have something in common. And one thing that I learned is that I like to write people.
Yeah.
I wrote so many people when I did my thesis, but I got Dr. Harding here.
Wow.
And they were like, how did you do that? I'm like, I asked. So let's talk about growth, nothing venture, nothing gain. And a lot of people with the imposter syndrome that they have, they just like really shy away from opportunities. So as a executive coach in residence at Berkeley, and along with your own company, what are some of the most memorable things, non-confidential of course, that you remember when you have to coach your client to get them out of their, to lean into their comfort zones and make sure they give it a shot. And then once they cross over, they started really believe in themselves. Do you have any stories that is really sticking to you on how that happens?
Yeah, so just to clarify, I'm an executive in residence at Berkeley Law School, and as part of that, I also do executive coaching, and with my own consultancy, I do executive coaching. And what's been interesting is that since I've left my operating role as a chief legal and chief financial officer, I've seen a lot of executive rooms, and what's interesting is that a lot of the clients that are coming to me now are often women or minorities. And part of that is because they see me, they can see that they relate to me and my experiences having been a woman minority in an executive room. And so they know that I can empathize with their experiences. And so one of the things that I've noticed among my clients and even people that are prospective clients that are coming to me, that a lot of them, like you said, struggle with imposter syndrome and struggle with confidence. And the fascinating part about all of it is that these are incredibly brilliant, very high achieving people. So you can see that this imposter syndrome issue cuts across all levels, cuts across all achievements. And some of it to a certain degree is that, you just need to also just believe in yourself, build confidence. And if you need to hire a coach to do it, it's something that you should really consider doing. And the thing that I typically work with them on, for example, if someone says, I want to look for a job in this position. I don't think I have the experience, or I don't feel confident saying that I have this experience. And a lot of people don't feel confident applying for jobs. And studies have shown a lot of women don't apply for jobs unless they match the criteria 80-90% of the time. And to find a job that exactly fits that criteria, it's very difficult to find. And you're also limiting yourself significantly by only finding those roles. So you're only literally falling into the exact bucket that you're currently in. But what you don't realize is that you also have vast amount of experiences elsewhere that you could probably put into your resume. And so what I work with people on is really helping them through what are some of the other things that they've done and really speaking to them and giving them confidence that actually that was a really amazing thing. And you should highlight it. You should flag it. You should put it on your resume, or you should talk about it in an interview. And so these are some of the tips and some of the practices that we do put in. I always believe in practical advice wherever possible. So I put a lot of the coaching tips into practical application. So if it's a resume, let's work on your resume together so that we're highlighting the key skills that you have done. You might not feel confident in it, but let's talk about it. Let's talk about why you're not confident in it. Is it because you've done it only a few times? Or is it because you just don't feel like you've done it 90% of the time? And so those are some of the things that we work through to make sure that we build people's confidence and also have them start thinking about how they can practice whatever skills that they're not feeling confident in to overcome that. If you are scared of presentations, let's think about opportunities for you to do more presentations so that you can overcome your feelings of lacking in confidence. And the other thing, sometimes a lot of minorities also get feedback around confidence and that they lack confidence. That feedback also, while helpful, is unhelpful. It's such a broad feedback that I always also encourage my clients to go back to the people that gave you that feedback and ask them for concrete examples of why that incident or why they decided to say that that was an area that you needed to develop and what exactly they meant by confidence that they wanted you or someone who is working with that person to develop.
Do you agree with the statement that confidence is more of a mindset than a behavior?
A lot of it is mindset, and you exude it if you have the mindset. And so part of it is that even if you don't have the skills, you see a lot of white men exuding confidence, and they apply for jobs where they only match 50% of the criteria. That's confidence. And that is lacking imposter syndrome. And so that is sort of a mindset change that a lot of women and minorities need to shift as well, too, that if you fit majority and you have the experience, you need to start building the confidence to say that you've learned it, you've learned things in the past, and that you can do it in the future.
Thank you so much for that. That was so much wisdom and nuggets in there. The next question that I have is, well, you started in government, investment banking, and then government, DOJ, and then FTC, I believe. When you talk about antitrust, it's actually funny. This could not be more timely because one of my team members, she graduated from UCLA. She was taking 2 gap years. So she's working with me part-time. But right now, I don't have enough work to sustain her, and then she needs to get a full-time job. So my growth there is that she's one of the person that I really like a lot. She's 23, just turned 23. And so we had a really serious talk. And then at some point I was like, I don't know exactly how I'm going to keep you full-time because I don't even work full-time myself. So I had to struggle because you don't want to let your best people go, but at the same time, you know that it's for the better. So I had to have a lot of internal struggle of actively trying to connect her with other people that can advance her and get her a full-time job. So I've been doing that with people at law firms because I do know lawyers because I work for them. And one of the topics that we talked about, it was another thing that I completely just block it out of my mind is that I used to work at a GP firm a long time ago, and I was hired for IP stuff, but then when the case settled, I had to learn how to do second request. And that was the old days when you have to affix space label on documents. So I had to, when she said to me, oh, one of the contacts you gave me, they wanted me to see if I wanted to go into helping with antitrust cases. So I'll be prepared to deal with a lot of documents. Because I like documents. I said, you don't understand what is the perspective of the document. You discover they're going to drag you. But at the same time, it's good. And she goes well, antitrust seems really, really fascinating. She doesn't have a tech background. So I wonder, what are your thoughts? You kind of have your hands in a lot of things, AI. Can you remember the days when you were working for government? How does that differ? And what kind of transferable skills do you think that you have gained from those roles and carry on to the very successful Irene Liu today?
Like you said earlier, I started out my career in investment banking. And so I was an Asian studies major like you. I actually studied Mandarin in college, too. And so it helps that I have a Taiwanese husband and a family that I can now use my Mandarin with.
You can practice.
Yeah, exactly. But when I went into investment banking, it was 9/11. It was 2001 when I graduated. I lived in New York, downtown New York, not far from the World Trade Center. And so the entire investment banking industry pretty much collapsed as I was starting out my career. And so I went through 5 different rounds of layoffs. I survived them all, but that was sort of the investment banking industry of that time. So I shielded myself and fled to law school. And then after experiencing corporate life, I decided maybe I should just go into the government, which was an area that I was always passionate about and interested in. I had interned at the DOJ when I was in college. I also interned at the DOJ when I was in law school. And so the DOJ experience was phenomenal. Antitrust is so pivotal in many ways. And in San Francisco, the office where I was part of for the US DOJ, we had the unique opportunity to do both civil and criminal antitrust. So not only were we doing merger reviews, but we were also knocking on white-collar criminals' doors. And and doing also criminal prosecutions as well. So it was a really great breadth that I was able to see in my first job out of law school. And what I had always been interested in doing, and everything that I've been doing throughout my career, is I'm very mission driven in many ways. I want to find a platform where I could do something positive and good. And so the DOJ was a great opportunity for me to do that. And same thing with the FTC. The FTC was where I went for the Bureau of Consumer Protection. So I was able to see a broader spectrum of government work. And that experience has really shaped me in many ways. A lot of lawyers typically graduate and go to a law firm, and that's their typical path. I had offers at law firms, but I decided to make a fraction of what they were making and make even less than what I made in college to take this job at the US DOJ. But that experience and the hands-on skills that I built is not something that anyone would have gotten right out of law school at a law firm. I was doing depositions as a first-year attorney, and I was doing a lot more hands-on work because we are short-staffed in the government. But the stakes were high, and it was high pressure, but it was also really amazing collegial group of attorneys. And the DOJ office in San Francisco in particular was surrounded by a lot of women and minorities, and we had a really diverse group of attorneys, which just made me realize how important it is to have a good team surrounding you. And so I would say my government experience really shaped me in many ways of trying to always continually find a really great team, as well as it helped shape my risk tolerance in many ways. Having been on the inside, a lot of people who went straight to law firms would think that there's a lot of risk in everything because they haven't seen the other side, whereas I can probably accurately identify the risks better than others because I've seen the other side and I know what they're looking at and what they're watching out for. And so it's made me a better advisor, a better business advisor, and a better GC as well when I became general counsel.
That's really interesting. I'm so glad that we went to the risk tolerance level because I think historically, traditionally, I think culturally too, Asians, based on what I like to believe, are very low on risk tolerance. And I think that if I were not grew up a majority of my life in Lawrence, Kansas, and I had a professor that took a very active interest in me, and he mentored me, and he was my thesis advisor. And the thing that he always taught me is that nothing venture, nothing gain. And even though with immigrant, we have a lot of actions-wise, I mean, it's for my parents to come all the way here, your parents to come all the way here, there's a lot of, nothing venture, nothing gain. But overall, I think that particular mindset, a lot of them, especially for women, it doesn't really foster like a high risk tolerance. It's like they want it to be safe. It's like, are you getting a good job? Do you have income security? So I am really grateful for having met some of my professors. I usually were really quiet when I was in college, but every once in a while, I had like this Asian professor, he's a history professor from Princeton. And he was so harsh on me. I know what he meant. He really took the traditional Asian, sort of like being a teacher and be hard on you. And that's when you grow the, fastest. But when I was doing my thesis, I think that he really backfired because it was so harsh that it crushed my confidence. And if I didn't have my other professor that does like the nothing venture, nothing gain, I would have totally just didn't think that I had it in me to graduate for my master's degree. Because I remember going to him, and he really meant well, but I remember, and this is in America, and I remember going to him, I'm like, you just marked up so much on my thesis. It's like when you see your work all in red ink, and you have like a week to finish your thesis and revise. And I wasn't sure whether I was going to make it. But then it turns out he was like, well, what made you think that your thesis was not good? I said, did you not look at all the red marks? So I think from that point, and thank God the other professor was like, the thesis was great. And I'm like, are you guys reading the same thing? Because it doesn't seem like this. So I like the fact that we are talking about this because one is taking a very traditional, like just really hard, and that's when you grow the best student, or, and the other one is really encourage my innovative and creative thinking. Because if you stop someone in their formative stage, and I don't think college is really a formative stage, and at that time, but he actually turned my mindset around a lot. I mean, I think it has to do with the discipline as well. One is in law and one is in history. I think the mindsets are very different, but one is like crushing me.
Which one crushed you? Was it the lawyer or the historian?
Historian.
Oh, okay.
It was interesting.
Oh.
And then when I finished my thesis and I finished revising it, the lawyer actually, he is hilarious. He's a Harvard Law graduate. He doesn't want to practice private law. He did a couple of years, but he decided to be an educator instead. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, he had passed. Mm-hmm. He loved to go to like Berkshire Choral Festival, mm-hmm. and he joined all the choirs and went to the Vatican City and sings and all these things. Really interesting person. Mm-hmm. And what I'm going to tell you is something hilarious because you had a BlackBerry history there, and he was so like amazing in everything, but he's anti-technology.
Interesting.
And every once in a while, so when I moved to the East Coast, he came and visit, and I gifted him a phone, and it was a BlackBerry. He would drive everywhere, but he would not want to have a phone because he just doesn't want to be tied down with technology. That's really interesting how you handle all of this stuff. And one morning when we went out for breakfast, I said, hey, listen, he's in the 60s at the time. I said, listen, the world is not quite safe, and you're driving all over the place. I worry for you, for your mother, because the mother is actually, the family has been trying to get him to get a phone. He wouldn't do it. I said, you know what? I'm just going to take matter in my own hand. I'm going to get you a BlackBerry. So I gave it to him, and he was like so grateful. He doesn't know what to say. But he also supported me a lot during my master degree because my parents had a Chinese restaurant, but they did not have a lot of money. Thank God, University of Kansas tuition was still bearable. But still, for my master degree, this particular professor, Kai, he offered for me to house at his place when he was doing visiting scholar, and he didn't charge me.
That's so nice. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I didn't understand at the time why he did that. I was like, but there's plenty of international students. Why are you not helping them? Then I realized that he really knows the difference of having an environment that is true to yourself, like physical environment, when you're writing your thesis. And if I'm working at the restaurant, I'm staying at home, it would have been very difficult for me to separate everything and actually truly come out with a good work product. And of course, as an Asian woman, student, and in the college town, I was like, I don't know that I could do that. People might gossip. So I need to ask my parents. So my parents were like, is he going to be there? I'm like, no, he's going to be in New York. So eventually we accepted his gift. I think mentorship is so important. So can we talk about what your thoughts about mentorship, especially in this day and age, the younger generation, knowing so much about technology, but not so high on EQ? I'd like to hear Irene's take on that.
It's interesting because I just attended a Women's History Month event with a number of leaders in tech at a VC office yesterday, and they were talking about their career journeys. And I share a lot of the perspectives that they had, that while you need mentors really to truly move up in an organization, you need sponsors. So mentors are people that'll walk with you, alongside you. They are the ones that'll give you advice if they may be outside of the organization or within the organization. But they're not like the ones that will be the sponsors that'll be talking about you, advocating for you, trying to move you up as they move up. A lot of these women also yesterday were talking about how they could see how their career progressed quickly when they had effective sponsors because they pull them up with them. And so one of the things I've always done when I led teams is to have a lot of my teams have had a number of women as my direct reports. And whenever I moved up, I've always helped them move up. And I've also helped promote them and move their careers along. And so my former associate general counsel is now the General Counsel of Checkr. My former head of commercial was the head of legal at Hopin after I left. And so a lot of these people also grew in their careers because I also helped them move up too. And so in that way, I've also benefited from other sponsors as well, too, of people that have spoken about me and spoken highly of me and have looked out for me within the organizations. And so that is something that for a younger generation, as they're looking at their careers, it's really important to figure out and find a team and find a manager and find a group that will help support you and support your growth. Ideally, your manager is the one that can help sponsor you and be one that can grow with you. And if you find a very ambitious and really determined leader, and they are good at sponsoring, follow them. Follow their careers, because their careers are going to progress really fast because they're good, they're determined, and they are going to be shooting up. And if they're good sponsors, that means you can follow them up the ladder with them. And so it's really important to find a good team and a good sponsor, and at the same time, find a network of mentors. You don't need to have just one mentor, two mentors. When I think about mentoring, I can't think of having like, I have one consistent good mentor, two consistent. I truly don't. And part of it is that I've gotten feedback from so many great leaders along the way, and I collect that wisdom from a larger group of people and use that towards my benefit. So I found mentorship can be ones where you do just have a collective group of people that you consult. And it might be for different reasons, for different issues. But building that network of people that you can trust, whose wisdom you trust, is something that's very important for your career. But truly, if you want to move up fast, find a sponsor within your organization. Just like you, Ashley, like you're essentially being a sponsor to this one individual that you just found a role for outside. You found her strengths. You found that she's really good. And instead of being like trying to keep her along for yourself, you're helping her to find other ways to move up. So in many ways, people should find managers or people that they really respect that can help them in their career journeys, especially when they're starting out young, because that sponsorship will be so meaningful in your careers.
Well, thank you for taking a notice of that. You have so many projects, and one of the things that I found out during the pandemic when I started my company, I found out that I really enjoy creative writing. And I did not realize that because I was in litigation. So I didn't really have a lot of time, and I didn't know how to practice setting boundaries and total people pleaser. So a lot of things that I have learned throughout my career, it is now sort of like paying forward to my team. And when it first started, I was like, I really don't know that I really want to deal with the younger generation. But that's sort of like the demographics going there. So you really kind of have to adapt. You know, and so one of the things that I decided to do is I wrote 2 books, and they're illustrated books. And some of the team members are actually artists. But, you know, it's like, how do you find a role for them in a virtual patent paralegal consultancy? Like, they don't know anything about that. I'm like, you know what? I'll help them. I'll show them how to do exhibits, scrubbing metadata, doing all these things. That's one of the reasons why we have a podcast. Except for me, everybody's freelancer. On my company, I do not have one full-time person. And I'm only full-time because I have like about 60 different things going on. And so I thought that was really interesting. And over the course of, especially since 2021, I started getting onto online Airbnb experience because I could not like get out. Once I traveled, I could not get out. So I met so many people, Olympic skeleton athlete. She's a friend. And I even took my mom to go see her in Calgary. And then I also know like a defense player of DC United, but now he has moved to Austin. And his daughter is the octopus in my book. Everybody is an avatar. And so the octopus Mia is actually Brandon's daughter. He used to be one of my tenants. It was just like so interesting how things evolve. right? And so when he called me, I thought it was a prank. He was looking for a place and he was coming in from, I think, Europe. He saw something on Zillow and I was like, I'd like to do a virtual tour of this place. I'm so and so. I'm like, I don't follow football. I don't know what you're talking about. And then he continued to say something. I was like, are you like, is this a scam? Because I mean, in the middle of like preparing exhibits. And so I saw it, I was like, is this a scam? He was like, no, this is not a scam, man. And then I was like, that's when you really think that it's a scam. But eventually, we actually, I was like, give me your full name. I'm going to search you right now. And it turns out that he's completely legit. When he's moving to the DC area, they had a real estate agent, but he looked for the place himself. So sometimes even men, they are not always that confident. His agent called me and said, well, are you going to pay me my commission? I'm like, what did you do? He looked for the place himself. You did nothing.
Yeah.
My friend asked me, he was like, did he ask you for money? I said, yeah, he did. But the thing is, if I didn't know how to say no, I would have totally fallen for it.
Yeah.
But you did not do anything, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think saying no, and I also know that you talked about this topic at the Sue and Tie. Shonda Rhimes, the director or the producer of Grey's Anatomy. So it's basically saying yes. As women, we should say more yes to opportunities. But then how do you balance the boundaries of those? Because sometimes saying yes, it means to business owner, you're taking on other people's liabilities. And I have actually had a lot of hard times saying no before, but now I think that I'm taking it more as a lessons learned. Sometimes I kick myself for not saying no fast enough. So I wonder how you look at yes and no, and how do you determine? And if you have to say no, is this a temporary no? Or how would you actually kind of look at that yes and no relationship and navigating boundaries?
So there's a yes and no spectrum from a personal life perspective as well as career. So when I look at it from a personal life perspective, let's say, whenever you say yes to something, that means time taken away to do something else, right? It's always a sacrifice of one thing or another. And so whenever you think about that equation, like how precious is your time, and is that time that you want to spend on doing whatever it is that you are asked? For me, a lot of the equations are, I often think about, and I have a tendency to please as well, and to have a tendency to say yes to a lot of things. But it also takes me away from my family time, from time away from my kids that are a priority to me at this stage of my life. And so I always want to weigh, is this something that is important to me? Is it important to my career? Is it important to my goals? Like, how does it relate to what I'm trying to pursue? And will it help me learn and grow? And if so, or is it something that will allow me to give back? And those are all of the things that are important to me. So I always factor in that when I think about the yes-no equation for my personal life, and really think about time as a finite asset. I mean, truly, we have a limited time on this earth. How do you want to spend it? And so you want to think about that from a personal standpoint. From a career standpoint, especially as a lawyer background that's worked in at tech companies as a general counsel, we are taught if you want to gain the trust of the CEO and the business, your job isn't to say no. Unless it's something criminal where someone goes to jail, you shouldn't say no. Really, at the end of the day, it is a business risk decision. You can help work with them to figure out how you can solve some of the issues where it might be high risk. But that is your job, is really to try to figure out how can we get to a yes, to find a solution that mitigates the risks instead of just outright saying no. And so a lot of the tension between outside counsel and in-house counsel is taught, in order to be effective, is to say yes to the business. And even Adobe General Counsel, I just recently read an interview that he did. His legal department slogan is "Yes starts here." And that is in particular because a lot of legal teams have this tension with the business, where a lot of their gut is to say no. But really, if you want to build a trusted business relationship and be a business partner in an organization and be effective, you really need to start saying yes. So figuring out how to partner with the business, and obviously when you do say yes to everything in a business because of that mindset, it also drowns you. So how do you continue to say yes in an effective way is really trying to align also with the business. So what are the business's top 5 priorities? If it doesn't match those and you have 50 other things on your plate, you can't do all 50 with a limited number of people and limited number of budget. And so you need to learn to prioritize and figure out how you can align with the business so that you are saying yes to the right things. And then for the other ones, maybe it's not now, we will get to it. And I will say, I will work on it, but perhaps this is not the company priority, and you are trying to say yes to the company priority. And so those are some of the ways that you should think about from a career perspective, especially if you're in-house counsel.
Thank you. I was at a women business symposium yesterday, and I was actually invited by a practice group leader when I went to a networking. Here's the thing that I'm seeing, especially in law firms. People, especially the good, really good workers, they will turn away opportunities to go networking because they have so much deadline that they need to get done. Yeah. And a lot of it is really about being seen. If you're not out there networking, you're missing opportunity to basically move laterally. And while you're thinking that you could actually sort of like progress in a linear fashion, like, you know, at a law firm will be associate, senior associate, partner, then maybe you could make equity, maybe you won't, and then at some point you go in-house. But I think sometimes people are missing those opportunities. It's like, I also see this in guys as well. I've actually advised some people before that, because like, I don't know that I have the time to do a webinar. So, well, you might not, but you need to have your brand out there because you are not always going to be at the same place. Even if you are at the same place, you still need to make a brand because what makes you different from the other person who's also working 90 hours a week. Yeah. So I thought that was really interesting. And in the old days, I would probably never say it. And then, like, when I was advising the young one, I was like, she was like, well, this one position, it says that it needs 2 years experience and blah, 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 blah. Do you think I should apply it? I said, apply it. They know how to say no to you, but you don't need to say no to them. You know? So I think that is really interesting. I really thought that I'm seeing the same thing. So many people start their email, start everything by saying, I'm sorry. I apologize for this. And it's not only women. And every single time I have a chance, because I learned that you don't start by saying you don't start saying sorry. If you really mean it, then apologize. But you don't need to start by saying sorry. And I have to tell you something hilarious. My master thesis was on intercultural negotiation studies. It's not enough that I was doing like literature review, doing basically Chinese-American negotiating style differences. I actually did an assimilation. So I wrote a joint venture scenario. I had a professor that was in law, so they could actually help me. So I put 2 groups of people, some business law professors, some grad students. So I had 2 groups of 6 people, and then we did a meta-analysis. But one thing that I remember, this is my recognition of sorry, is that during the day of the simulation, I got one lawyer who was very, very interested in coming to the simulation. He forgot to get the address. I mean, I sent it to the secretary and I sent it to him. And on the day of, he didn't show up because he didn't know where he was going. And he left me a voicemail at the student, like the Center for East Asian Study. He left me a really nasty voicemail and saying that, you know, I can't believe you are wasting my time and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, I'm going to make sure that you do not have a career before you start or something like that. I was freaking out. So, because I didn't have a career yet. So I went to my, another professor who's also a law professor. And I said, I don't know what I'm going to do. I really being a people pleaser, that does not really work well with me. I said, can you advise me what I need to do? So this other lawyer told me, he's like, well, you should apologize. I said, but I didn't do anything wrong. And he was like, there's a difference between apology. You apologize for the situation. You apologize for the misunderstanding. That's not your problem.
Mm-hmm.
You can remove yourself, but you still need to apologize if you do not want to make enemies before this happens. This is from a guy's advice. But if you truly apologize, if you truly did something wrong, then you apologize. So that really stuck with me. And lately, I have been focusing a lot of literature about women empowerment. And it doesn't matter how experienced they might be at C-suite. The first thing that they would say is, I'm so sorry I have not responded to you. And in some of the books, the literature that I have reviewed, Lisa Sun, Gravitas, who wrote Gravitas, and we've talked about like reframing. And it's instead of saying, I'm sorry, I apologize for the delay, thank you for your understanding, and thank you for your patience. So that is such a switch. And I think that was really amazing. I have a lot of people that wanted to be on the podcast, which is kind of a really nice testament, you know? And you are even on, right? So I'm just super grateful. Wow, we just kind of went all over the place, which is why this is okay. We know that we are not scripting anything.
Yeah.
Just two Asian women chatting about our journey.
So I want to talk about just what you were talking about networking, the importance of it, especially for minorities and women. You were just talking about how a lot of people are focused on putting their head down and working and getting their mountain of work done. And that is something that I don't think a lot of people see beyond that there's so much value in networking. And that, like you said, unless you get your name out there, people won't necessarily know. And I think even in my earlier career, I had my head down because I wanted to move up fast. And I thought moving up fast is by putting my head down, getting my work done. But really, at the end of the day, in order for you to have sponsors and have other people advocating for you, you need to have your head up. You need to have coffees with people that are above you. You need to have people that are peers in different groups. You need to have others that are advocating for you, and you're not going to be able to do that if all you're doing is sitting in front of a computer all day. And so it is so important to not only network externally, but also internally and build that relationship with others so that doors will open. And so that is one thing that I wish I knew about doing earlier. But what was interesting is that I attended a lot of these events, mainly because I had a lot of curiosity and wanted to learn. So I attended a lot of legal conferences because the topics were interesting. It was something that I wanted to learn. And through that, I built a network. And then over time, I realized the power of that network. But it took me a while to get there, to even realize how important it is to use that network and build a brand. And I now have been more focused on that. But that's not something that I discovered until later in life. And so I do really encourage people earlier in their careers, when they're thinking about their careers, think more broadly than just the work that's in front of them, and to really try to build relationships inside and outside of the workplace.
You want to talk about DEIA real quick before we close our chat?
Yeah, sure. So on the D&I front, obviously there's been a lot of backlash on it, which is incredibly unfortunate. But it is so important in order for us to build a culture of inclusion in organizations that people are thinking about diversity. And so one of the things that I have always done when I was at organizations is I try to empower women. A number of the people that were my direct reports were women, and I try to foster opportunities for them as well too. And so it's, again, really important to find the sponsors in organizations that will help you grow. And especially for general counsels and other lawyers or whoever has a budget, if you're even if you're in marketing organization or other organizations where you are using external vendors, it's important to use your purse strings and your budget to help support organizations that are led by diverse owners and diverse partners. So, for example, when I was at a company and I was the general counsel there, 70% of the law firms that we utilized had either the female or a minority partner associated to the account. And that was really important to us, and that was important to me. And I had made sure that we were focusing on fostering diversity also within the law firms as well, because we wanted to hold them accountable to diversity too. And so one of the people that connected us, as you know, is a firm that has 2 phenomenal women patent attorneys. And so what drew me to them was the fact that there were these really 2 incredibly brilliant women that will be helping with my IP portfolio. And so some of the criteria beyond the people that I hired was diversity. And it's important that, especially if you're holding a budget, that you think consciously about how to use that budget as well to foster diversity. And final point is around AI. I know we talked about how I'm very involved in the AI front. AI, as we know, is currently in a state where we can shape it to be more ethical, fair, and transparent. And in order to do that, we need diversity at the forefront. We need people that are sitting around the tables that are developing, that have a diversity mindset, that have a lens to be able to incorporate that into the usage as well as development, not only the inputs, but the outputs. And so it is so important to have D&I incorporated at a cross-functional group, especially for AI cross-functional groups. And it's not something that can be ignored, especially if you want to build a AI future that is equitable and fair.
Well, great minds think alike, because I was going to go there in terms of giving a shout out to Megan Redmond, ERISE IP.
Yeah.
She was like, you must know Irene Liu.
So sweet.
Yes, I know. So shout out to them, kudos to ERISE IP for connecting us. And the other thing is I wanted to thank all the wisdom that you have shared today. And I'm so glad that we completely just went everywhere. That's the best thing.
Yeah, thank you for sharing your journey too. It was really interesting to see the overlaps.
Yes, definitely. And so I wish you and Hypergrowth GC a lot of success. And now you are part of the Femtech Titans. And thank you so much for taking your valuable time and spending time and having this chat so that we could share both of our experiences, live experience that other people can sort of hopefully get something to help them reframe their mindset and grow.
Yeah.
So, thank you so much, Irene.
Thank you for the invitation.